Be me, 43, newly appointed CEO of technology services company with 200 employees across software development, customer support, sales, and operations. Had strong feminist beliefs about workplace equality, passionate about dismantling what I saw as entrenched old boys network in tech industry. Posted frequently on social media about need for aggressive action to remove older men who blocked opportunities for women and younger workers. Believed that men over 40 represented patriarchal establishment maintaining power through experience and seniority rather than merit. Got promoted to CEO specifically because board wanted transformational leader who'd modernize company culture and accelerate diversity initiatives. One of my first priorities was conducting comprehensive demographic analysis of workforce to identify barriers to advancement for women. Discovered that 35 of 200 employees were men over age 40, representing 17.5% of workforce, but holding 60% of senior positions. Posted analysis on social media showing how older men dominated leadership, preventing advancement opportunities for diverse talent. Prepared presentation for board arguing that removing older male employees would create immediate openings for women and younger workers. That experience and institutional knowledge they claimed to provide was actually just gatekeeping, protecting their positions. Board seemed concerned, asking if I was suggesting terminating employees based on age and gender demographics. I explained this was strategic workforce restructuring to eliminate legacy employees blocking organizational transformation. That older men's resistance to change and attachment to traditional hierarchies made them barrier to innovation and diversity. Board chair said they supported diversity, but mass terminations based on demographics could create serious legal liability. I said creative restructuring could achieve same goals without explicitly stating age and gender as termination criteria. That we could identify positions for elimination, then coincidentally, those positions happened to be held by older men. Board reluctantly approved what I characterized as organizational restructuring, pending legal review of implementation plan. 2 months into tenure as CEO, began implementing restructuring plan targeting departments with highest concentration of older male employees. Started with software development, where 12 of 50 developers were men over 40, several in senior architect and team lead positions. Announced restructuring, eliminating 5 senior developer positions, citing need to flatten hierarchy and reduce overhead costs. All 5 eliminated positions were held by men between ages 42 to 58 who'd been with company between 8 to 15 years. Senior software architect named Robert, who was 52 and had been with company 12 years, seemed shocked by elimination of his position. Asked why his role was being eliminated when he'd received excellent performance reviews and led successful projects. I explained restructuring was about strategic realignment, not individual performance. That company was moving in different direction. Robert asked if he could apply for other positions since he had valuable skills and institutional knowledge. Said other positions required different skill sets and company was looking for fresh perspectives, not legacy experience. He seemed to understand this meant despite 12 years of excellent work, he was being pushed out without opportunity to stay. Similar conversations happened with 4 other senior male developers whose positions had been eliminated in restructuring. All expressed confusion about sudden elimination of roles they'd held successfully for years with strong performance records. Second wave of restructuring targeted operations department, where 8 of 30 employees were men over 40 in management positions. Announced elimination of 3 operations management positions, citing need for more agile, less hierarchical structure. All 3 eliminated positions were held by men ages 45 to 56 who'd been managing operations teams for 6 to 12 years. Operations director named Michael, who was 48, asked if elimination was related to his age since all terminated managers were over 45. I said age was not factor, purely about restructuring operations for more dynamic collaborative model. Michael pointed out that 3 younger male managers and 2 female managers had been retained, while only older men were eliminated. Said retention decisions were based on alignment with new operational model, not demographics of employees. He filed internal complaints suggesting age discrimination before leaving company after 10 years of service. Third wave targeted sales department, where 7 of 40 employees were men over 40, several in senior account manager roles. Eliminated 4 senior account manager positions, citing shift toward team-based selling rather than individual client ownership. All 4 eliminated positions held by men ages 43 to 59 who'd been managing major client relationships for 5 to 14 years. Senior account manager, named Thomas, who was 56, had been top revenue generator for 8 consecutive years. Asked how eliminating top performers aligned with company's business goals and revenue objectives. I explained revenue generation was important, but cultural fit and alignment with new direction mattered more. Thomas said it seemed like cultural fit meant being under 40 and preferably female based on who was retained versus eliminated. Filed EEOC complaint alleging age and gender discrimination before departing with several major client relationships. 4 months into tenure had eliminated 18 positions, all held by men over 40, replacing them with younger employees, predominantly women. Posted on social media about successful restructuring, creating opportunities for diverse talent previously blocked by legacy employees. Got supportive comments from diversity advocates praising bold action to dismantle entrenched male power structures. One commenter said this is exactly what transformational leadership looks like, removing barriers to women's advancement. Another said older men claiming discrimination proves they feel entitled to positions they're blocking others from accessing, but started receiving concerning letters from attorneys representing multiple former employees alleging discrimination. Robert's attorney sent notice that he was filing age discrimination lawsuit claiming termination was based on being over 40. Michael's attorney sent similar notice adding gender discrimination claim since only male managers over 40 had been eliminated. Thomas's attorney sent notice representing him and 3 other former senior account managers in age and gender discrimination suit. 5 months into tenure, company received notice that 15 former employees had joined class action lawsuit alleging systematic discrimination. Lawsuit claimed I'd implemented coordinated plan to terminate all men over 40 regardless of performance or business necessity. That restructuring had been pretextual cover for age and gender-based terminations targeting older male employees specifically. Evidence included my social media posts about removing older men blocking opportunities and creating space for diverse talent, and statistical analysis showing 18 of 18 eliminated positions had been held by men over 40, while younger men and women were retained. Most damaging was internal email I'd sent to HR discussing plan to eliminate legacy male employees resistant to change. Company attorney reviewed lawsuit and evidence with grave concern, saying case appeared extremely strong for plaintiffs. That my social media post showed discriminatory intent and statistical patterns showed disparate impact. And that internal emails discussing targeting legacy male employees was explicit evidence of age and gender discrimination. I felt defensive, saying I'd been restructuring to create opportunities, not discriminating against protected classes. Attorney said intent might have been creating opportunities, but method was eliminating all men over 40, which was illegal discrimination. That ADEA and Title VII prohibited employment decisions based on age and gender even when motivated by diversity goals. Asked if I considered retaining any men over 40 or if elimination plan had specifically targeted that demographic. I admitted plan had focused on removing older male employees because they dominated senior positions, blocking advancement. Attorney said that was textbook age and gender discrimination regardless of ultimate goal being diversity. 6 months into tenure, board called emergency meeting about class action lawsuit threatening company's financial viability. Said lawsuit represented 15 former employees with strong discrimination claims based on clear pattern of age and gender bias. That discovery would expose my social media posts and internal communications showing discriminatory intent, and that potential damages for willful age and gender discrimination could exceed $5 million, bankrupting company. Board chair asked how I'd allowed such clear discriminatory pattern to develop when they'd warned about legal liability. I explained I'd believed strategic restructuring, creating opportunities for women, was different from illegal discrimination. That removing older men blocking advancement had seemed like necessary step toward diversity, not discriminatory action. Board chair said removing people because of age and gender was discrimination even when goal was creating diversity. That my posts and emails showed I targeted men over 40 specifically, which plaintiffs could easily prove violated law. 7 months into tenure, attempted settlement negotiations with plaintiff attorneys representing 15 former employees. Plaintiffs demanded $4.2 million total settlement plus agreement that I be removed as CEO and company implement non-discriminatory hiring. Company attorney said demand was reasonable given strength of evidence and potential for much larger jury verdict. That my documented intent to remove older male employees plus statistical pattern made case nearly impossible to defend. I felt devastated that diversity initiative had been characterized as discrimination, potentially bankrupting company. Board approved settlement negotiations, saying $4.2 million would severely damage company, but trial could result in complete bankruptcy. 8 months into tenure as CEO, sat in settlement conference listening to former employees describe impact of discriminatory terminations. Robert, the 52-year-old software architect, said termination after 12 years of excellent work had devastated his career and finances. That being eliminated specifically for being older man had made him feel disposable despite years of valuable contributions. Michael, the 48-year-old operations director, said filing discrimination complaint had been necessary after watching only older men be eliminated. That pattern had been so obvious that even younger employees had recognized restructuring targeted specific demographic. Thomas, the 56-year-old senior account manager, said losing job at his age when all younger men were retained was clearly discriminatory. That his 8 consecutive years as top revenue producer should have protected him if decisions were really performance-based. Listening to former employees describe harm from my restructuring made clear impact of what I believed was progressive action. Settlement was reached at $3.8 million to be paid over 3 years, plus my resignation as CEO effective immediately. Company would implement independent monitoring of employment decisions to ensure non-discrimination for 5 years. And provide neutral references for all 18 former employees whose positions had been eliminated in discriminatory restructuring. Board accepted settlement, saying it was necessary to avoid bankruptcy, but company's financial position was now severely compromised. 9 months after beginning as CEO, was forced to resign after settlement of discrimination lawsuit I'd created through restructuring. Posted statements saying I'd been trying to create opportunities for diverse talent, but had made serious mistakes in implementation. Got very mixed responses, with some feminists supporting my goals and others saying I'd engaged in obvious illegal discrimination. One commenter said your intent was good, but firing all men over 40 was textbook age discrimination regardless of diversity goals. Another said you proved critics right that diversity initiatives are really discrimination against men, set movement back years. But some defenders said lawsuit was backlash against necessary action to remove entrenched male power from leadership. Started therapy to process resignation and understand how diversity initiative had become discrimination lawsuit. Therapist asked me to describe what I'd hoped to achieve by eliminating positions held by men over 40. I said I'd wanted to create opportunities for women and younger workers blocked by older men's dominance of senior positions. She asked if eliminating all men over 40 had been necessary to create opportunities or if I could have achieved goals differently. I was quiet because I'd never considered retaining any men over 40. Plan had specifically targeted that entire demographic. She said it sounds like you decided all older men were a problem regardless of individual merit or performance. That Robert had 12 years of excellent work. Thomas was top revenue generator, but both were eliminated for being older men. And that targeting entire demographic for elimination was discrimination even when motivated by diversity goals. This was painful realization that I'd stereotyped and discriminated against older men while believing I was promoting equality. Started thinking about 18 men I'd eliminated and whether any had deserved to keep positions based on performance. Robert had been excellent software architect with institutional knowledge about systems and client relationships. Michael had managed operations effectively for 10 years with strong performance reviews throughout tenure. Thomas had been top revenue generator for 8 consecutive years, bringing in millions in sales annually. But I'd eliminated all of them because they were men over 40, not because of actual performance or business necessity. Year after beginning as CEO reflected on how diversity restructuring had become $3.8 million discrimination settlement. Realized biggest mistake had been assuming all older men were blocking progress regardless of individual contributions. That I'd stereotyped entire demographic as resistant legacy employees when many had been excellent performers. And that social media posts and emails about removing older men had created undeniable evidence of discriminatory intent. Started consulting work helping companies pursue diversity without discriminatory termination of specific demographics. Main message was that my restructuring had been obvious age and gender discrimination despite diversity goals. That eliminating all 18 men over 40 while retaining younger men and women created clear statistical pattern proving bias. One consulting client was planning similar restructuring targeting older employees to create advancement opportunities. My experience convinced them that diversity could be achieved through hiring and promotion, not discriminatory terminations. Another client had CEO posting about removing older workers to make room for fresh talent. Helped them understand those posts created evidence of age discrimination that would be used in litigation. 2 years after beginning as CEO, published article about experience titled My Diversity Initiative became $4 million discrimination lawsuit. Detailed how I'd eliminated 18 positions, all held by men over 40, believing I was creating opportunities, not discriminating. That lawsuit had proved restructuring was age and gender discrimination through statistical pattern and documented intent. And that settlement had nearly bankrupted company while forcing my resignation and 5 years of monitoring. Article went viral in business community with over 600K reads and intense debate about diversity versus discrimination. Many business leaders appreciated cautionary tale about how diversity goals could become illegal discrimination. One CEO commented essential warning about pursuing diversity through terminations rather than inclusive hiring and development. Another commented your social media posts about removing older men were smoking gun, proving discriminatory intent. But some diversity advocates criticized articles saying I'd validated opponents who claimed diversity was discrimination against men. One blogger wrote author betrayed diversity movement by admitting initiative targeting older men was discrimination. Another wrote settlement doesn't prove discrimination happened, just proves company chose not to fight for what was right. 3 years after beginning as CEO, company completed final settlement payment of $3.8 million for discrimination I'd caused. Company had lost significant market position due to financial strain and departure of experienced employees with institutional knowledge. Several major clients had followed Thomas and other senior account managers to competitors after discriminatory terminations. Board estimated total cost, including settlement, lost revenue, and competitive position decline exceeded $12 million. Current leadership had spent 3 years rebuilding trust and demonstrating commitment to non-discriminatory employment practices. 4 years after restructuring, ran into Robert, the software architect I'd eliminated at age 52 for being older man. He said termination had forced early retirement and significantly reduced his lifetime earnings and retirement security. That settlement payment had helped, but couldn't replace years of income and career advancement he'd lost. Being eliminated specifically for age and gender rather than performance had been humiliating and devastating. I apologized for discriminatory termination disguised as restructuring that had harmed his career and finances. He said he hoped my consulting work prevented other companies from treating experienced employees as disposable based on demographics. That his case had become famous example in employment law courses about obvious age and gender discrimination. 5 years after restructuring, published book about experience wanting to help leaders pursue diversity without discrimination. Detailed complete story from demographic analysis to restructuring plan to terminations to lawsuit to settlement. Included legal analysis of how age and gender discrimination laws applied even when motivation was diversity. And framework for creating opportunities through inclusive practices rather than discriminatory elimination of demographics. Book became required reading in business schools as case study about diversity initiatives crossing into illegal discrimination. One professor wrote essential text for understanding how good intentions don't excuse violation of anti-discrimination laws. Another wrote authors' social media posts about removing older men are perfect evidence for teaching discriminatory intent. Started speaking at business conferences about learning from $3.8 million discrimination settlement that nearly bankrupted company. Main message was that eliminating all men over 40 was obvious discrimination regardless of diversity goals. That statistical pattern of 18 terminated employees being older men proved disparate impact. One conference attendee said her company was planning similar restructuring. Presentation convinced leadership it was discriminatory. Another said his CEO had been posting about removing older workers, used my story to explain legal liability. 6 years after restructuring published follow-up research on diversity initiatives that became discrimination lawsuits. Studied 300 companies comparing those that achieved diversity through inclusive practices versus discriminatory terminations. Found that companies terminating specific demographics faced discrimination suits 85% of time, with average settlements of $2.1 million. While companies using inclusive hiring and development achieved diversity without legal liability or workforce disruption. Research validated that my approach of eliminating older men had been worst possible method for diversity goals. Started training corporate boards on overseeing diversity initiatives to ensure legal compliance and effectiveness. Main framework was achieving diversity through expansion and inclusion, not contraction and elimination of demographics. First boards implementing training reported better diversity outcomes without discrimination complaints or litigation. 7 years after restructuring reflected on complete devastation caused by eliminating all men over 40. Realized that Robert, Michael, Thomas, and 15 others had been excellent employees eliminated solely for demographics. That my social media posts and emails about removing older men had created undeniable evidence of discriminatory intent. And that $3.8 million settlement plus $12 million in total damages had nearly destroyed company I'd been hired to transform. Current reflection 8 years after firing all men over 40 and panicking when discrimination lawsuit threatened bankruptcy. Learned that diversity goals didn't justify eliminating entire demographic regardless of individual merit or performance. That Robert's 12 years of excellence and Thomas's top revenue generation should have protected them from elimination. That statistical pattern showing 18 terminated employees were men over 40 proved systematic discrimination. That my posts about removing legacy male employees was explicit evidence of age and gender bias motivating decisions. Most importantly, that $3.8 million settlement and my forced resignation were appropriate consequences for discriminatory restructuring. That's what I learned from firing all men over 40, then panicking when lawsuit exposed obvious discrimination. From believing I was creating opportunities to understanding I was eliminating people based on protected characteristics. From diversity initiative to discrimination lawsuit that nearly bankrupted company I'd been hired to lead. That's my complete story about restructuring that became textbook example of age and gender discrimination. 8 years after restructuring, continued consulting helping companies distinguish between diversity and discrimination. Most impactful work involved CEOs recognizing themselves planning to eliminate specific demographics for diversity goals. One CEO wanted to terminate all employees over 50 to create younger, more dynamic workforce. After hearing complete story, understood that was age discrimination, not workforce optimization strategy. Revised approach to achieve generational diversity through mentoring and knowledge transfer, not discriminatory terminations. Another CEO was planning to eliminate senior male employees to accelerate women's advancement into leadership. Worked with them on understanding advancement could happen through development and promotion, not gender-based eliminations. 9 years after restructuring, published comprehensive guide for legal diversity and inclusion initiatives. Detailed framework showing how to achieve demographic diversity without discriminatory elimination of existing employees. Included legal analysis of ADEA and Title VII, showing how my restructuring violated both through age and gender targeting. And case studies comparing successful inclusive diversity programs to discriminatory elimination programs like mine. Guide became standard resource for HR professionals and executives pursuing diversity within legal boundaries. 10 years after restructuring, company had finally recovered from financial and reputational damage of discrimination settlement. Current CEO had rebuilt through inclusive practices, creating diversity without eliminating any demographic groups. Workforce was more diverse than when I'd been CEO, but through hiring and development, not discriminatory terminations. Company had become case study in how to recover from discrimination lawsuit and implement genuinely inclusive practices. Board had implemented strict oversight, ensuring no employment decisions were made based on age, gender, or other protected characteristics. Started mentoring young executives specifically about pursuing diversity without discriminatory elimination of demographics. One mentee wanted to accelerate diversity by creating early retirement incentives targeting older employees. After our work together, understood that targeting older workers for elimination even through incentives was age discrimination. Developed alternative approach, creating development opportunities for diverse talent without pushing out existing employees. Another mentee had been told by board to increase diversity quickly through workforce restructuring. Helped her understand restructuring could only be non-discriminatory if it didn't disproportionately impact protected demographics. She implemented hiring and promotion strategy, achieving diversity goals without eliminating anyone based on characteristics. Current reflection 11 years after firing all men over 40 and facing discrimination lawsuit that nearly caused bankruptcy. Learned that 11 years of helping companies avoid discriminatory diversity initiatives gave meaning to my violation. That eliminating Robert, Michael, Thomas, and 15 others based on being older men was obvious illegal discrimination. That statistical pattern plus documented intent made lawsuit unwinnable, forcing $3.8 million settlement and my resignation. Most importantly, that diversity could and should be achieved through inclusion, not elimination of demographic groups. That's everything learned from 11 years since restructuring became discrimination lawsuit, nearly destroying company. From believing removing older men created opportunities to understanding it was illegal age and gender discrimination. From diversity initiative to $3.8 million settlement plus $12 million total damages and forced resignation as CEO. That's my final lesson about firing all men over 40, then panicking when obvious discrimination nearly bankrupted company. 11 years after restructuring, continued work helping organizations pursue genuine inclusion without discrimination. Most powerful sessions involved leaders understanding difference between expanding diversity and eliminating demographics. One Fortune 500 company had been planning restructuring similar to mine, targeting older male employees. After comprehensive review of my case, they abandoned elimination approach in favor of inclusive hiring strategy. Achieved diversity goals over 5 years through development and promotion without single discrimination complaint. Another tech startup had young CEO wanting to prevent older employees from joining to maintain young culture. Worked with board on understanding that was age discrimination and hiring creating liability before employees even joined. They revised approach welcoming all ages and found generational diversity, improved innovation and decision-making. 12 years after restructuring, published final comprehensive analysis of diversity versus discrimination in employment. Detailed legal and ethical frameworks showing how inclusion could be achieved without elimination of protected groups. Included my case as primary example of how diversity goals could become discrimination through demographic targeting, and contrasted with successful inclusive programs that had achieved diversity without litigation or workforce disruption. Analysis became definitive resource cited in employment law courses and used by companies developing diversity strategies. Current reflection 13 years after firing all men over 40 and watching discrimination lawsuit nearly bankrupt company. Learned that 13 years of reflection and work preventing similar discrimination gave some redemption for my violation. That Robert and 17 other men over 40 had been eliminated solely for demographics, not performance or business necessity. That my documented intent plus statistical pattern made discrimination so obvious that settlement was only option. That $3.8 million settlement and forced resignation were appropriate consequences for systematic age and gender discrimination. Most importantly, that diversity initiatives must expand inclusion, not eliminate demographics, to be both legal and ethical. That's my complete final reflection on restructuring that became textbook discrimination case, nearly destroying company. From CEO hired to transform company, to CEO fired for discriminating against men over 40. From diversity initiative to discrimination lawsuit that cost $3.8 million settlement plus $12 million in total damages. That's everything from 13 years of learning why firing all men over 40 was obvious discrimination bankrupting company.